I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. This is a meeting of a Budget and Finance Committee. The purpose of the meeting is, at this time, the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County and the Scranton Tomorrow will conduct a forum on the ballot question regarding the business mercantile tax to a payroll tax to be paid by the employer. At this time, I would like to welcome Andrea Mulrain from the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrea Mulrain, and I'm a board member for the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County, and we're so happy that you're here tonight so that we can hopefully get through an explanation of what the ballot question means for the City of Scranton and the school district. So on November 5th, the voters will be faced with this question: do you favor the Scranton School District converting from a business mercantile tax to a payroll tax to be paid by the employer? A tax rate will be set so the amount collected the first year will be the same as the amount collected the previous year. After the first year, the amount collected from the employer will be dependent upon the total employer payroll. So that's the question that voters will be facing on November 5th. And we're grateful to all of our panelists this evening, as well as our partners, including the Scranton School Board, Scranton Tomorrow, the University of Scranton, and ECTV. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We are volunteer and grassroots-based, and we encourage active and informed participation in government. That's our purpose in being here tonight. Our local league spends all of our time basically focused on voter education. So we've had debates with the Scranton mayoral candidates, Scranton City Council, interviews with Scranton School Board candidates, and Lackawanna County Controller candidates, and tomorrow evening, back at the Moskowitz Theater at the University of Scranton, we will have a debate for the Lackawanna County Commissioners. So there's a lot going on. All of that is available to the public through ECTV and also on the League's website through YouTube. So lwvlackawanna.org, you can get the schedule for ECTV and learn more about all of these important races that are going on right now. There is another ballot question that all voters in Pennsylvania will face pertaining to Marsy's Law, which is a crime victims law. I will tell you that the local league is not doing any education on that, so I would suggest that you either visit Marsy's Law or the lwv.org, the Pennsylvania League of Women Voters, for additional information on both sides of that particular issue. With that, I'd like to turn the evening over to our moderator this evening, Dr. Jean Wall-Harris, who is a political science professor at the University of Scranton. And Jean is also a past president of the League of Women Voters and a board member, or not a board member currently, but a member of the league as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to her, and we'll get going. Thanks, Jean.
Good evening, and thank you for being here, and those who will watch later. So this is an event to try to educate voters on the Scranton School District referendum. So the citizens who vote in the city of Scranton and live in the school district, the Scranton School District, will have an opportunity to vote yes or no to approve or reject the question that Andrea read. So what we'd like to do is start by introducing the panelists, and then Mr. Balzoni will give some introductory comments, and we'll move along from there with questions and comments from me and the other panelists, and then turning to the board. And the audience can also, if they have questions, write them down and hand them to Andrea Mulrain or her husband, and they will go through them and present those questions as well. So first, the panelists. First, we have Mr. David Balzoni, who is the business administrator for the city of Scranton. Next to him is Terry Ohms, the executive director of the Institute at Wilkes University. Next to her is Patrick Leafy, business manager of the Scranton School District. And on the end is Candace Finan, who is the chief recovery officer of the Scranton School District. And so first we'll let Mr. Balzoni begin with some introductory comments.
Thank you, Jean. These sort of go beyond introductory, and I'm surprised you didn't introduce me as Mr. Mayhem. I gave everybody a lot of grief over the last few days. Sorry. I'm going to go through a lot of data, okay, so I don't want to bore everyone to tears, but this really sets it up so pay attention. I'm going to jump right in and get into a component of the City of Scranton Act 47 exit plan, which was prepared by the Pennsylvania Economy League on June 30th, 2017. Section 9.4, Revenue Section 4. Consider a transition from mercantile business privilege tax to a payroll preparation tax. That's where it began for us meaning the City of Scranton. And follow this through. The City of Scranton levies a business privilege and mercantile tax on all businesses except those statutorily exempt, such as manufacturers, which we already know. Like all political subdivisions in the Commonwealth, the city and the school district are barred from raising their business privilege and mercantile tax rates. The 2014 amendments to Act 47 provided another revenue alternative for Act 47 municipalities, the payroll preparation tax. They're now permitted with court approval to replace the BPMT with a payroll preparation tax. The tax is levied on for-profit employers and imposed as a flat percentage of gross payroll. The initial implementation of this tax must be on a revenue-neutral basis, though the base has the ability to grow organically over time as payrolls grow. An important consideration is the ability for the payroll preparation tax to remain in place even after the municipality exits Act 47. Thus, the change would be permanent. The city will need to coordinate with the school district as they impose the tax and to work with the city's legislative delegation to address changes in the act that would allow the school district to make a similar transition. And this had already occurred. Because of the required revenue-neutral phase in the time period and the estimated time for that transition, no financial impact is expected in the time frame of the amended recovery plan. The initiative will be considered as a strengthening of the tax base and will increase more than the revenue source replaced. This was in the city's exit plan, 2017. Why replace the business privilege and mercantile tax? Again, according to the recovery coordinator, in a memorandum dated May 2016, the business privilege and mercantile taxes are generally regarded as regressive taxes, which are particularly unfair because they tax the gross amount of business revenues without regard to deductions. This, of course, came from the city's recovery coordinator. What is the authorization to levy a payroll preparation tax? Everyone's still awake, right? Again, from the coordinator, Section 303 of the Local Tax Enabling Act, as amended, sets forth the authorization for a payroll preparation tax as referenced in Section 123D2 of Act 47, Distressed Municipalities Act. Okay, we're going to look at some numbers right now because the numbers are important. I'm going to first start off by asking what will be a rhetorical question. What is a measure of tax collection efficiency? And I think if you understand this answer, you'll begin to understand how all this takes shape. The percentage of delinquent tax collections to current tax collections. And that's important. And we'll look at a couple examples of tax efficiency. We're going to reference the foundation of the payroll preparation tax, which uses a similar tax collection protocol as the earned income tax. Okay, we're going to use 2018 City of Scranton collection results. The percentage of delinquent earned income tax collections to current collections, this is earned income tax, was 0.42%. That's a relatively nominal total of delinquent earned income tax collections to total. And in this case, it's 113,884 to 27.36 million in total collections. The combined delinquent to current collection percentage for BPMT, Business Privilege and Mercantile Tax, again, 2018, was 11.66. So that's 263,000 of delinquent BPMT versus 2.2 million in current collections. That should say something. Now we're going to look at organic growth as well. So organic growth and earned income tax versus BPMT from 2014 through 2018. And again, I'm using current collections, which are important to consider. Total current BPMT collections increased from 2.1 million to 2.26 million, or 4.54% over that time period, 2014-2018. Total EIT increased by 2.8 million from 24.5 million to 27.36 million, or 11.48%. Why is this organic growth important? Let's look at changes in the city's assessed valuation from the 2015 budget to what will be in the 2020 budget. The city's land value decreased from 91.83 million to 89.36 million, or 1.995 million. The city's improvement value decreased from 336,580 to 296,473,758. So the city's improvement value decreased over that budget reporting period by 9.862 million. Think about that for a minute. So if your millage stays the same and you're calculating on your assessed value, your numbers have gone down. So you're starting the budget process out in the hole every year. Welcome to my world. And Pat's. So that's why it's important to recognize the concept of organic growth, because you're not getting it in your assessed valuation. It's certainly not doing it from a real estate tax standpoint. I'm going to look at a snapshot, and I think Terry's probably going to get into this a little bit as well, but the payroll preparation tax performance of the only other Commonwealth municipality which levies a tax in the city of Pittsburgh. And this came again from the recovery coordinator. Their initial evaluation was based on performance with the city of Pittsburgh, and that's why it was recommended to the city of Scranton. According to a November 12, 2012 memorandum prepared by the Pennsylvania Economy League, payroll preparation tax receipts increased from $44.436 million in 2007 to $51.057 million in 2011, or a 14.90% increase. The increase comes despite a phased-in approach that was required under Act 222 of 2004, which basically gave the city of Pittsburgh the ability to levy the tax. So they couldn't just convert immediately as we're looking at doing. They actually had to phase it in. So they had to reduce their business privilege and mercantile tax while implementing the payroll preparation tax, or as they call it, their payroll expense tax. I think it's kind of like soda and pop. Relative to the execution of the payroll preparation tax levy, the city and the recovery coordinator conducted 2 reviews of payroll data. The most recent review was used 2018 payroll data, which was compiled by Berkheimer, the earned income tax collection agent for the county. The list was also scrubbed by the single tax office. They took that data and looked at it and then started to sort it out to remove nonprofits and ineligible payrolls. The gross payroll amount was $1,368,127,090. Now, if you subtract out ineligibles, nonprofits, it dropped it down to $882 million. That's a significant decrease. But it is what it is. I mean, that's what we have. That's what we're dealing with. The conversion amount, based on a rate of 0.28609%, or what amounts to 2.86 mils, equates to $2,525,723 in potential collections if you convert over to the payroll preparation tax. And that's compared to total BMPT, business privilege and mercantile tax revenues, for the city of Scranton, the last complete fiscal year, which was 2018, of $2.525 million. The numbers are truly the relevance of this discussion.
Thank you. Does anybody else on the panel want to add to anything that Mr. Bolzoni said or highlight what he said?
And sorry about boring everyone to death, and sorry about taking up way too much time.
Okay, so let's just go to some basic questions. Compare the two taxes. What is taxed by the business mercantile tax? What is taxed and who actually has to pay it? And compare that to the payroll tax. What is actually taxed and who is responsible for paying it? Anybody want to start there? Go ahead, Terry.
The business and mercantile tax is paid by businesses that represent all sectors except for manufacturing and financial institutions. The business fills out the tax form based upon their gross revenues and pays the tax. For a payroll tax, it is actually based on gross payrolls, which frankly is a better opportunity for business because of the fact that it's more reflective of the size and strength of a business. Gross revenues does not really dictate whether or not a business has a strong financial position, but their payrolls are more reflective of that. So it is a flat percentage off the payrolls, and it is also something the businesses pay. Now, what happens in the payroll tax is that financial institutions and manufacturing firms also pay. So it broadens the tax base, creating much more economic stability and diversity in the payers that pay the tax, which gives the local government entities some more level of stability so they don't walk into a budget year with a major deficit like Dave had described.
So in both cases, the employer is paying the tax, so this is not impacting residents who don't own businesses and employ others. So the employer pays, and the payroll tax expands the tax base, so more people are actually paying into this tax.
Right, and the tax will grow as payroll grows. And if payroll is growing, businesses are earning more, they are having, they're able to hire more and create more jobs, so it's not necessarily, shall we say, impacting the business in a negative fashion. And statistics in Pittsburgh have demonstrated that the number of businesses have grown since the tax has been in place. They've hired more employees since the taxes have been in place, and their payrolls have grown. So it has not impacted business activity in Pittsburgh.
Okay. And the folks who don't pay the business mercantile tax, such as financial institutions and manufacturing, they would be paying the payroll tax.
Correct.
Okay. Are there disproportionate impacts of the payroll tax to local businesses that are employee intensive? And if so, has anybody heard concerns raised by those types of those employers? So is there a sense that it has a disproportionate impact on employee-intensive organizations, other than adding new groups to who has to pay the tax?
No, it's based really on gross payroll. So if your payroll is $100,000 a year and you have 20 employees, and you then have another business that has a payroll of $100,000 a year with only 10 employees, they're going to be paying the same amount because it's based on that gross payroll.
Okay.
So it's not impacted by the number of employees rather than the total annual wages, bonuses, other financial parts of the package.
Okay, thanks. In terms of the tax collection side, so the actual collection of the taxes, what entity currently is overseeing the collection of the business mercantile tax, and is that the same entity that would be overseeing the collection of the payroll tax?
Well, it certainly could be. So the business privilege and mercantile tax is presently a responsibility of the single tax office, which is a unique entity for the city of Scranton. Scranton's classified as a Class 2A city, even though it really is a Class 3 city. But it's classified legislatively as a Class 2A city. It really is the only municipality in the Commonwealth that has the single tax office assignment. They presently collect a number of Act 511 taxes that were authorized under the Local Tax Enabling Act, one of those being the business privilege and mercantile tax. As far as the payroll preparation tax, they certainly would have the ability to collect it. The earned income tax collector would obviously also have the ability to collect it. That's Berkheimer. And there are, I think, a few other entities throughout the Commonwealth that also provide collection services for tax revenue.
Okay. In terms of the tax, is one tax more onerous on the employers to comply with, in your view? So in terms of the paperwork and the record keeping that has to be done to implement the payroll tax, is that really going to change some things for employers compared to the business mercantile?
Business privilege and mercantile tax is basically, it's basically the same system that's been in place for quite some time. A lot of it is labor intensive. A lot of it is relatively manual. The payroll preparation tax, at least from what I've seen, has very little intervention that's involved. It's very similar to the collection of earned income tax. I mean, it is the foundation of the payroll preparation tax is the earned income tax. It's really kind of interesting because, and this kind of goes back to what Terry said before, really fascinating stuff. Go out to the City of Pittsburgh website, the payroll expense tax collected by the city. It's right on their website. Information such as who is taxed, what is taxed, the payroll, and again, they call it payroll expense tax is defined as common exclusions, and then actually provides the form that's used, two-page form. Business privilege and mercantile tax is a bit more involved, and if you go out to the Berkheimer website, there's actually a form, business privilege and mercantile tax, frequently asked questions. I would certainly recommend everyone in the audience go out to the website and look at the information. It's great stuff. It's very explanatory, and it'll certainly give you a lot of information that you may not gain from this presentation.
Anybody want to add to that? Okay. So is one tax more connected to the health of the local economy than the other? So Terry, you suggested in Pittsburgh they saw lots of growth, and that was captured partly in moving to the payroll tax. They saw that. So is one tax more closely tied to the health of the local economy than the other tax, and so really is dependent on the growth or the downfall of the local economy?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that if you're looking at the strength of the economy, it's, well, the business revenues do contribute to the regional gross domestic product and are an indicator of success. But if you want to break it down to the more individual health of a business, gross revenues can be very deceiving. When it's reflected in actual payroll costs, however, then you can really evaluate more the strength of the business. And so payroll, I think, is more closely tied to business strength than overall gross revenues. I think it's very misleading.
And remember, we're talking about two taxes. So I can compare it to, one is an intestinal virus and the other is a bacterial infection. I mean, I don't think anyone really wants to look at, you know, what the advantage of one tax is over another. But I think a lot of the information that we've discussed shows, especially relative to the efficiency of collection, which one is more advantageous, where you get the organic growth. Now, that's not to say that there aren't factors that would have to be addressed. Again, you've got a different tax structure with different effects, and you certainly have to consider what those impacts are. So as you are changing from one tax to another, just as an example, so the payroll preparation tax would have an impact on manufacturers and financial institutions. That's not presently the case under under BP and Merck. But also, it's much more favorable in a service-related economy for businesses that have very narrow margins. And you see a lot of that in the retail and service sector. So it's going to have a very favorable impact on those businesses. But there are impacts across the board, and you have to be conscious of them. Pittsburgh did a very good job of actually meeting with those businesses that would be impacted, and I would certainly suggest that the city and the school district do the same if it gets to that point, to really discuss where the benefits are, what the impact is, where we see all of this going.
Thanks. Just a kind of a implementation question. So we recognize that the conversion from the business mercantile tax to the payroll tax for the city can only be made while the city is under Act 47. So the question is, can the city exit Act 47 without making this conversion, or is the conversion required for the city to exit Act 47?
It is not a mandate, it's a recommendation. A strong recommendation.
A strong recommendation, but it's not a mandate.
Correct.
Thanks. So why is the Scranton School Board considering the conversion to a payroll tax? What are the expected benefits, if any, if the school board goes in this direction? Mr. Laffey.
Excuse me. Yes, I believe the Scranton School Board, as we've spoken up here so far, it's that organic growth, that is the potential for revenue growth that we've, from a current year basis, is the wages are increasing at a greater rate than what our gross receipts are.
And anybody, do you think that the conversion to a payroll tax will actually attract business and potentially grow the tax rate? It seems like it did that in Pittsburgh. Any reasons why you don't expect something similar to happen here in Scranton? Or any signs that you would expect the same thing to happen here in Scranton?
I think there's certainly some distinctions between Pittsburgh and Scranton, if there's any question about it. But this is just one tool in the kit. And again, I think tax efficiency is relatively significant because you're achieving maximum value for whatever taxes you're collecting. But there's also delivery of services. And unless you're able to maximize that value and use it for the delivery of services, you've got an impediment to attract business. So a lot of it is in execution. Bringing the money in is fine. What you do with it is another story. And you've got to be effective at delivering those services in order to be able to attract businesses. I think the city and the school district have done a lot. There are certainly a number of initiatives that we think could benefit as a catalyst for attracting businesses, such as the recent LRTA legislation that was approved. But again, you've got to do something with that. Putting legislation on the books isn't going to help. The conversion, we think, is important because of the way the economy in the city is developing and where it might be attractive and certainly less punitive to businesses that function with lower margins. And in that case, a lot of businesses within the service and retail sector are affected.
A question, excuse me, in terms of the challenges that might come from the conversion to the payroll tax, so challenges for either residents or the city government or the school board. Will the flow of tax revenue from employers to the city and to the school district change in a detrimental way? The business mercantile tax, I think, is collected several times a year. The payroll tax would just be once a year. Is that going to hamper or improve the flow of cash flow for either the school board or the city administration, or have a neutral impact?
Well, currently, the school district, we are estimating that we receive about 77% of our BP Merck revenue by May 31st of each year. That's with the due date of April 15th. I believe if we follow Pittsburgh's model and it's a quarterly remittance, it will change the flow of cash flow, but I don't think it will be to a detriment to the district.
Okay. Thank you. So under the state, in terms of implementation again, under the state law, the payroll tax rate can be adjusted after the first year to account for any shortfall in revenue raised by the payroll tax compared to that raised in the prior year by the business mercantile tax. Should city residents be prepared for a revenue shortfall in year one? The fact that the law gives you the right to make a correction after the first year, is that something that we should anticipate is a revenue shortfall in year one of implementing a payroll tax?
Well, relative to the city, the rate has to be certified by the city's recovery coordinator before the court. So there has to be a thorough evaluation of what that conversion rate is. Again, it's supposed to be revenue neutral, so you're trying to match that number to your most recent total collection period, which is 2018. So as far as the arithmetic exercise goes to convert that over, that's relatively easy. But as far as actually matching that rate with total revenues, there's bound to be an adjustment. When we converted the rate over, at least the preliminary conversion, we didn't factor in costs of collection because we don't know what they are. So that may be an adjustment after year one. Also, while certainly not the 16-page document of exceptions and exclusions under business privilege and mercantile tax, there are some nuances within the payroll preparation tax that have to be considered, and certainly these are nuances, not necessarily exemptions, that I think have to be evaluated. There's a concept called apportionment, and certainly you can investigate it a bit further. But if you have a business located in the city with an employee who does not work in the city typically, that employee's that person is not incorporated within that total payroll number. So there is some impact there. It's probably relatively minor, but hence the ability to create that adjustment after year one. And certainly you want to, I think both the city and school district want to position themselves in order to make that adjustment with some assurances that there's going to be at least an equivalent amount of revenue that had been received under BP and mercantile.
And the reality of budgeting is always lots of prediction and guesswork. And so at the end of the year, things never equal exactly what you expect. And so obviously, even though there's numbers, it's not that tied to the numbers. Things change as you progress.
Yeah, never, ever.
Yeah. So budgeting, I tell my students, is a lot of guesswork, which they don't like to hear when it's their tax dollars. Can the city still convert to the payroll tax if the school district does not convert?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of the referendum question that's coming up November 5th, if the majority of Scranton voters vote yes on the ballot question supporting the conversion to a payroll tax, does that authorize the conversion, or does it simply allow the school board to vote on the matter?
As we understand it, it would simply allow the school board to vote on the matter prior to the adoption of our 2020 budget.
So a vote to support the payroll tax conversion from the citizens, the voters in the city, is really just a vote to allow the school board to then vote.
That is our understanding.
And if the citizens of the city who vote the ballot question down, do not support converting to the payroll tax, does that mean that the school board also has to not consider it, or can the school board still consider it?
We believe that a vote of no would not allow the school board to reconsider for the 2020 budget.
Okay. So a vote yes, the school board can consider it and make a determination. A vote no, the school board can't consider it for this cycle. And down the road, would the school board be able to reconsider converting to a payroll tax?
The guidance that we've received from Pennsylvania Department of Education, and also our solicitor, is that we can only adopt the payroll prep tax while the city is under Act 47 recovery, and it must be done in the election preceding that budget year. So we feel that this is our window.
Okay.
And it really is the only window, because I believe the city, the requirement under the exit plan and under the Revisions Act 47 would have the city out at the latest in August of next year. And I'm sure the state is looking forward to our exit anyway.
So if indeed the school board gets the yes vote and the school board then moves forward to convert to a payroll tax, when would the conversion actually occur? When would it actually be implemented? And the same thing for the Scranton city. When exactly would this change from the current business mercantile to the payroll impact employers?
The city's incorporated the payroll preparation tax as a line item in the draft budget.
From the school district standpoint, it would have to be adopted for January 1, 2020.
2020.
Correct.
Okay. So it would have to be within the next couple of months that the work to convert would all be completed so that it can occur beginning the fiscal year for both entities, which is January 1, 2020. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to see if any of the school board members have questions they'd like to ask. And if you do have a question, there's a microphone there for the school board members. And if you can introduce yourself before you ask your question. Thank you.
My name's Paul Duffy. I'm a member of the Scranton School Board. I just don't want to have my back to everybody, sorry. So I have a few questions. Some of them might be a little bit rhetorical, but I just wanted to gain a little bit of certainty and maybe spread a little bit of opinion or knowledge with regard to this issue. My first question is, how much do we receive as a school district from the BP and mercantile taxes compared to the $2.3 million that the city does?
In 2018, the school district received $7 million.
And as Mr. Belzoni stated, you did say that this is the first time that this will ever happen. Has any other school districts throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania ever done this before?
No, they have not.
In doing so, is there a plausible scenario that could happen where we come up short in any way, shape, or form when we begin to collect this tax throughout 2020?
I believe anything's possible. I mean, there has been a lot of work to set the rate to be as revenue neutral as we certainly could be.
And that's where my issue really comes into place. I think the city, it's a great thing for businesses. I think it's a great thing for growth. I think it's a thing that will be important, as Mr. Bolzoni stated, with regard to the LRTA. The LRTA combined with us getting rid of the BP Mercantile, I think will attract businesses to the area and not allow them to set up right around our perimeter and not come in and do business with the city. So I'm a little torn on this one myself. I think it's a great move for the city. I think it's a little bit more of a tumultuous move for the school board in particular because of the fact that we use that $7 million every year. It seems like as of late we've been doing a better job, or the tax office has been doing a better job in the late collections of BP Mercantile. So our BP Mercantile has gone up over the past year. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Laffey. So that tax, as they say, is revenue neutral on one side. However, we're seeing a slight growth with regard to the collections on ours, and it does help us to a certain extent. So that being said, I just wanted to make sure that when we go to the ballot, we have all of the information, and I look forward to the city coming out of distress, but I do want to proceed cautiously, and I'm glad that we will have another, or the new board will have another chance to vote on this come November or December, because I think there's a few things that are variables, and normally when the school is on firmer footing, I think it's a great idea, and it's a complete slam dunk all the way around. However, this year, going into the new year with all the budget shortcomings that we have with regard to fair funding and a number of other things, I think we have to look closely at that. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you again for setting this up.
Thank you. And so again, there is an ability after the first year to make adjustments in the rate if indeed there was, it was not revenue neutral at least. So just to point that out. Other school board members with questions? And again, if you can introduce yourself first, thanks.
How you doing? I'm Tom Borthwick. For those who don't know, I also don't want to have my back to everybody. So this tax is based on the total payroll, gross payroll of any business based in the city, correct? What about businesses outside the city that operate within the city? Like, let's pretend there's a contractor based in Clark Summit, but their employees do work in Scranton. How do we account for that?
I believe the tax is based off of, and Dave, if you can jump in and confirm this, is based off of any wages earned while operating in the cities.
Okay, so it's wages earned, not the actual location of the business. Is that correct, Dave?
Correct.
That's my understanding, and they'll do
Yeah.
proportions as well. So if you are located here in the city, but you have workers that are out in Dixon City, you're not paying on those workers. So there is a way to calculate
Okay, and
which
so,
employees are covered in the payroll tax.
And
So the
again,
employer has to.
and,
I'll refer you to,
The Pittsburgh.
and I've said this before, Pittsburgh has a great fact sheet on their website. Who is taxed? All persons that engage, hire, employ, or contract with one or more individuals as employees to perform work or render services within the city of Pittsburgh. Payroll tax is computed on the employer's payroll expense and on the net earning distribution of sole proprietors, individuals, partnerships, associations, joint ventures, or other entities that perform work, provide service, or make sales within the city of Pittsburgh. You do not need to be located in the city of Pittsburgh to be subject to this tax. So I think that answers your question. But again, the information is out there. And I know we're going through this all very quickly. I would strongly suggest go out to the website, look at this information, frequently asked questions. They're all the questions that you're answering tonight. They're answered by the city of Pittsburgh. I think it'd be very helpful to everyone in the audience.
well, the reason I bring it up is for informational purposes. This means that businesses who aren't paying any taxes in Scranton right now, but are making, they're not paying business and mercantile because maybe they're not based here or whatever, or maybe they're avoiding it. We're looking at collection issues. So that's why I bring that up. The other thing is, I've seen preliminary estimates of total payroll. You're looking at basing this on the on information related to the EIT, correct?
Correct.
So when you did your projections, did you do EIT based on just the city of Scranton, or did you look outside to see businesses that, again, operate in here but might not be located here?
The information that we had gotten from Berkheimer took that into consideration.
Oh, good. Okay, I didn't know that.
And again, we had the single tax office scrub that data to evaluate as well. So we're reasonably certain that the information is correct. Keep in mind, this is relatively unique within the Commonwealth because the conversion for the city of Pittsburgh was phased in. So they reduced business privilege and mercantile tax over, I think it was a 3-year period, and then fully implemented the payroll, what they call the payroll expense tax. So this is a little bit different. I think we want to make sure that if there's going to be a go forward on this, we want to go through a third evaluation of that data just to make sure we've got that conversion number correct. But we've gone through it twice. We've evaluated that data twice, made some adjustments to the conversion rate after the initial review, and I'm sure if we go through it again, there's going to be a conversion rate adjustment also.
And just for information's sake, Pat, I know we saw a number of the amount of gross payroll in the city. You remember that number, roughly, the amount, total gross payroll estimate?
The factor that was used to determine the rate?
Not the factor, the actual dollar amount. I believe you said the total payroll is in the billions?
Well, as Dave, I think, noted earlier, it was 1.3 billion was total payroll, and around 400 million was backed out for a taxable rate of about $890 million.
Okay.
882.
All right, thank you for that information.
Thank you.
My name is Greg Popel. I'm the chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee. One question, as far as the mercantile tax right now, one of the problems is because of the lower tax assessment. It appears as though the county is on the way to performing a reassessment. If that figure goes up, which it probably will, would that also increase the money available by the mercantile tax?
Well, I think based on the comparative information that I had indicated before about assessed valuations decreasing, I think we'd probably welcome a reassessment. What that impact is, I'm not quite sure.
The next thing I'd like to have is Dr. Fine, and I'd like to have your input on this as to how this would affect the district. As you know, as everybody knows, we're in a financial recovery also, and I know how critical every dollar that comes into the district and how it impacts the recovery. Could you please offer some information?
Certainly. As you heard today, this conversion needs to be revenue neutral. If it is in fact revenue neutral, then I think for the 2020 budget, we're budgeting $7.1 million. If that's true and we collect that, there wouldn't be a major impact. If we don't collect the $7.1 million, then we will have some decisions that we have to make on the school board. The problem is we're dealing with probability here and possibilities, and we don't really know what a conversion would be. My one concern, I think it's the educator in me, is when are we going to educate the public about what this means? If I'm a business owner, do I really understand the changes that will occur? I mean, January 1st, 2020 is around the corner. It's not that far in advance. So I think there has to be a lot of education, at least my understanding from what I read about Pittsburgh. They did a number of educational venues to explain to the businesses when the taxes would occur. Again, right now, we're only collecting it once a year. And so there would be a change in 4 times a year. We are, in the Scranton School District, strapped for money. We don't have one extra dollar. So if we don't collect $7.1 million, programs, staffing will be affected. There's no question about that. I cannot sit here and say that a conversion will in fact bring that $7.1 million in. We hope it will. We've done all the calculations. We read everything that we could read, and we certainly calculated the rate to be revenue neutral. But again, I'm certainly concerned because if we don't collect that $7.1 million, that will impact how we deliver programs in Scranton School District.
Hi, I'm Barb Dixon. I'm on the school board. I just have a question. Something jumped out at me, Mr. Bolzoni, when you were talking about the land and improvement value decreased in Scranton, both of those values, and we're comparing ourselves to the model in Pittsburgh. I'm just curious what their values are. Are their values improving? Are they in the same category as we are that would affect their impact of growth on business? Because our ultimate goal is to attract businesses here, correct?
Absolutely. And no, I really didn't look at it, but I would probably hazard a guess to say that Allegheny County has reassessed after 1965 or 1968. So I'm sure the valuations are a little bit different. Right. And I don't mean to be sarcastic, but I am being sarcastic. And I think it's a pretty significant distinction. And I think, everyone here in this room understands what that impact is. And, I had indicated just looking at improvement value over a 5-year budget period to see a $10 million decrease, that's huge.
Other questions from board members? And then we'll go to audience questions.
I'm Katie Gilmartin, Scranton School Board member, and Barb's question kind of leads nicely right into my thought. Is there anything, I mean, certainly, Dave, when you look at the numbers from Pittsburgh and you do visit that website and see those charts, it's hopeful, which is good news for all of us. But is there anything that you are aware of or anyone else that makes Pittsburgh very different from us? Is there anything that was happening over those last several years that would have impacted the growth of economic growth as a whole or growth of payroll specifically?
Well, the city of Pittsburgh had exited Act 47, so they had gone through a very similar process. Some acute financial difficulties, not dissimilar to Scranton. Ours, I think, were much more widely publicized for a number of reasons. I think and Terry might be able to address this better than I can, just some of the characteristics of the economy are a little bit different than what you'd see in Scranton, the makeup, size of employers. I think it's become a pretty significant technological center. All things that I think we would really love to see, and I think the city and the school district are working along those lines, but we're certainly behind where Pittsburgh is at right now because of their exit from Act 47 and just some of the the economic characteristics that I think they have, they're a little bit different than in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Katie, the data that I looked at showed that Pittsburgh saw the growth in employers that had 20 to 99 employees. So they weren't major businesses, although Pittsburgh is home to a number of corporate headquarters, which is something that we do lack here. But when you look at composition of the counties in other parts in each part of the state, I mean, Pittsburgh has a great eds and meds economy. People go there because of higher education, because of premier health care, and that's the same sort of factor here. I think one of the other things that we have available to us in northeastern Pennsylvania is that place. We are at a point where businesses can reach I think it's about a third of the U.S. population within 8 to 10 hours of travel time. So it is a great area to move product to from all over, and from the ports in New York and New Jersey here because of the transportation system. I think another factor is just looking at the revitalization of downtown. There have been so many things that have taken hold here over the past few years, including the increase in downtown housing, more retail and hospitality popping up. So we're seeing a resurgence and a transition in our economy. And I think with the assets that we already have in place, that we're on a very positive trajectory. I was able to look at some of the data that we licensed through a major U.S. big data company, and it indicated that it anticipates the city of Scranton will see job growth over the next 10 years. And with that, obviously, payroll growth. So while there's been some retraction in some industries, we're seeing growth in other industries, and we expect to maintain that employment because there's going to be a lot of retirees, and so there's incredible job opportunity for younger people to come in and fill those existing jobs, as well as see some growth on top of it.
And I'll add that a lot of the effort is attributable to the activities of Scranton Tomorrow. I've done a great job in the city's downtown.
Thank you. And then quickly, just about the rate. Dave, you said that the Act 47 coordinator will certify the city's rate. Does the school district go through the same process, or does someone else certify ours?
I'm not sure, does yours have to be certified before the court as well?
I don't believe ours need to be certified before the court, but I would like to follow up with our solicitor regarding that question.
Okay.
Obviously, when we prepared the ballot referendum, we were advised to provide the rate with it, so we performed that calculation. The next steps, if there's any changes to it, I'm not sure what they would be.
Okay. And then sort of a more, I don't know, conceptual question. I don't think it's any secret that I myself am not a big fan of tax incentives. And I'm just wondering if there's any thought that sort of leveling the playing field in terms of taxes across the board, making this more equitable, more progressive, does that ever mitigate the need for those one-time incentives geared towards specific businesses or specific needs? Does it just kind of level the playing field for everyone?
Are you talking about the payroll preparation tax?
Yes.
Well, as it was presented to us, it's a broader base tax, which in itself would be considered more equitable because of its distribution. So I think in that regard, there are advantages to looking at it versus business privilege and mercantile. Business privilege and mercantile have been somewhat problematic, and what triggered the city's involvement and the recovery coordinator's activity relative to payroll prep. And I'll read this from a 2013 analysis of the city's tax base. The current tax base of business privilege and mercantile tax is likely underrepresenting the full extent of those businesses required to pay the tax. Before the city can fully understand the impact of any changes to the tax structure, there must be an effort to reconcile existing tax records and verify the status of all businesses and revenues in order to complete a more realistic assessment of the two types of taxes. That's what triggered the audit discovery process, and it certainly wasn't nearly as successful as we would have liked it to have been. But I think the fact that it goes back to what I said before. What is tax efficiency? The percentage of delinquent tax to whatever you're collecting on a current year basis. You're not going to have that inefficiency with a payroll preparation tax as you do with business privilege and mercantile.
Thank you, and thank you all for this. Very helpful.
Thanks. Andrea, I think we maybe have time for...
I have two quick questions.
Okay.
So first of all, why wasn't this conversion recommended earlier during the recovery process, instead of making a final hour decision for the voters and the board? And question number two is, why weren't we afforded the same luxury as a phase-in that Pittsburgh received?
Well, I don't know if I can answer the first question. The second question had to do with the Act 222 of 2004, which was relative exclusively to the city of Pittsburgh. That's what the Act consisted of. There were a lot of other components to that Act involving a parking tax that was intertwined with payroll expense tax. So it was kind of unique in its structure. Why the timing of the legislative effort to incorporate the school district into the ability to execute the payroll preparation tax, I really can't answer that. I mean, that would be a question for the legislators and what that process consisted of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Every clock is different, so I think we have at least one or 2 minutes for questions from the audience.
Well, I also told Mark I might run over, so he's giving me permission to go a little bit longer. The first question, and Dave, I think you touched on this a little bit. Is there a current backlog of unpaid mercantile taxes in the city as there is with garbage fees and property taxes? And I direct that to both you and to Pat.
An unpaid backlog. If I'm understanding what you're saying, unpaid taxes. I don't know if I would categorize it as a backlog. Backlog means eventually you're going to pay, and maybe in some cases they are, but as I noted before, the delinquent percentage to the, compared to the current collection percentage is very significant, so there certainly is an issue relative to payment of business privilege and mercantile taxes.
Anything to add?
Yes, and obviously, I think the city and the school district have undertaken some efforts to collect delinquent business delinquent business privilege taxes, and through those groups doing some audit discovery, I think we're trying to identify and collect as many delinquencies as possible.
Okay. I got asked, I know that this question's been answered, but it was also asked twice, handed in to me, so I'm going to ask it again. Will a payroll tax apply to all organizations, including nonprofits? And I know you've answered that, but I'm going to ask you to answer it again.
Right, we did answer it.
Sorry.
No, it does not apply to nonprofits.
As defined by the state government, so feds have different
Correct.
rules.
So I think one thing that needs to be clear to everybody who's going to the polls to vote, because it's the residents in the city of Scranton who are voting on this, and these residents may be a business owner or may not be a business owner, but one of the questions is, how does this affect any worker that works within or lives within the city of Scranton boundary? But this is a tax that's based on the employer. It's not a new tax coming out of your individual paycheck, but it's a tax that your employer would pay. So anything to add on that?
You just answered your own
correct.
question.
And the law,
I try.
And the law says that it can't be passed on in any way, so it's the employer.
It's the employer, not the individual person who would pay. It is the employer. I don't know this, I don't understand this question at all, but that's me. Is there an impact on the Act 511 lawsuit? Is this an Act 511 tax?
I don't even think I'm going to address that, but it does fall under the Local Tax Enabling Act.
Okay. And this question was asked twice. and this isn't totally an opinion question, would there be an impact on employee raises or bonuses? Is there any evidence from Pittsburgh that employers reduce or avoid giving raises or bonuses because it would increase their tax rate? I mean, I think that's an opinion piece, and I'll invite all of you to give your opinions on that.
The only data that I had access to review today demonstrated that there was an increase in payroll and an increase in jobs and an increase in the number of businesses. I cannot translate that into individual wages at this time.
Okay. And Dr. Finan, I know that you stated that the school district can't afford to lose any dollar of that $7.1 million, and I understand that, but I'm going to refer back to what Dr. Harris said, and that's that a budget is always a lot of guesswork and a lot of estimation. So based on that, there is no guarantee either that if the school district doesn't convert, that the $7.1 million would be collected. Is that correct? I mean, if we lost a big business in the city or something along those lines, that could also have an impact. Is that correct or not?
Certainly that would be accurate. However, we have historical data that we track, and we basically build our budgets on that historical data. And I think having had a tax in place, you can rely on historical data. When you're changing or converting a tax, we wouldn't have that kind of data to look at. And the other concern from a school district standpoint would be there is no other school district in all of Pennsylvania that has this tax. There are 500 districts in Pennsylvania, and not one, not even Pittsburgh, has converted to a payroll prep tax.
So this question also from the audience, what would cause the payment to the district to decrease, and by what percentage? I guess what's the fear there?
What's the fear is that it's not revenue neutral. People don't understand the tax, and therefore maybe don't understand that they have to pay the last part of their BP MERC tax and then start the new payroll prep tax, and maybe there would be a delay. So the fear is we operate, and I heard what you said about a budget, and certainly a budget is a plan. But when you're in recovery, as the Scranton School District is in, every dollar matters. And we don't have reserve accounts to go to. We don't have a budgetary reserve account. We don't have any reserve accounts that we can go to look for that $7 million or $2 million or $1 million. We would actually have to furlough and reduce programs is what we would have to do. So it is a major concern to a school district. If we had reserves of $10 million, I'd sit here and say, okay, we know what we will do if we don't collect that as we predict we hope to have in our budget. So I think when you have historical data, it's easier to build a budget, and that's how we've built this budget on that 7.1. And of course, the tax rate was computed on that revenue neutral piece of the tax law.
Okay, thank you.
I'll add, Andrea, the city's not exactly flush either. So, you know, we run very tight budget also. I think, you know, basically the way it's laid out, you know, we're fairly confident that the conversion to generate those dollars is acceptable. But I think what's important is looking at the longer term impact, not only in organic revenue growth, which I think is very important, but also the distribution of the tax and how it winds up benefiting the growth prospects in the city of Scranton, which is critical also, again, over a longer term period. So I think those considerations have to be factored in also.
I would just like to say, I think I would be very concerned about the business environment within the city of Scranton if the referendum is passed by the voters and adopted by the city, but not by the school district. Because then Scranton businesses are looking at two separate taxes and reporting measures to have to deal with, and I think that could be very detrimental.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions that I had from the audience. On behalf of the League of Women Voters in Scranton tomorrow, I want to thank all of the panelists for being here, and I'll step away from the mic.
Thanks. And of course, budgets are built on previous data, and so it's not all guesswork. I realize that. But we don't have the data for what that will compare to the city payroll tax. I would like to thank everybody for joining us tonight and reiterate what Mr. Bolzoni said about going to the Pittsburgh website and looking at the frequently asked questions. There's a lot of information there. Pittsburgh is different. Theirs was a phasing process, so it's not exactly the same, but some of the basic information is answered on the website. So please take advantage of internet access, and if you don't have it, go to your local library so that you can get online and take a look at the frequently asked questions that are already out there. So thank you all this evening, and don't forget to vote on Election Day, November 5th. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters in Scranton Tomorrow for convening this panel, and Dr. Jean Harris for running the information. At this time, we're adjourned. Thank you. The board,